This is Scott the Fix-It Guy. Today we're dealing with a Frigidaire dryer that just keeps beeping and just kind of randomly beeping at different times. And this is a common problem that happens due to the control unit that lives right behind the display is just getting older and it's starting to malfunction. So you get like some funny lights blinking and random beeping for no reason. Even though the dryer isn't even on, it'll occasionally beep. And the way to fix it is to replace the control unit. And you can get a brand new one, you can get a remanufactured one a little bit cheaper. It's really not that hard to install it. But it's a common problem with this model. They're otherwise pretty good dryers. But probably at the 10-year mark, some component on the circuit board fails and the things will just start beeping randomly. So what I found with this dryer is that the vent tube was also really clogged. It might have overheated at some point and that might have damaged the control. This one vents vertically straight up, so it was full of lint and I had to remove a lot, probably about 2 basketball worth of volume. Here's the new control. We're going to put that in by removing the top and the front panel. So I'm taking the screws off of the back. There's 2 Phillips head screws. And then what I'll do is I'll grab the upper panel and I'll push it away from me and then I'll lift it off of the dryer. Just set that off to the side. And then I've got 4 Phillips head screws that are holding the front panel on, and I've got to remove those so I can get to the control. I'm also going to separate these 2 modular electrical connections, and I've got to also remove a little zip tie that's holding the wires in place. So now I'm using the Phillips head screwdriver to remove the 2 screws on the top that are holding the control panel in. There's also 2 small screws that are down about 3 inches below where those top screws were, and they're on the horizontal plane, and you have to look in from the back to even see those screws, and we're going to zip those out also with a Phillips head screwdriver, and we can take the front panel right off. So we'll just take out those bottom 2. A little bit hard to find. They're smaller, and you'll see them though. They're holding in the bottom 2 corners of the plastic control panel, and then we should be able to just lift the panel right off. It doesn't really have any clips. Just has those 4 screws holding it in. There we go. We got some wires hooked up there. We're going to pull the wires through the firewall frame. We're going to take pictures of how the wires are connected to the control, and then we'll just remove those. Some of these will be hard to remove. You might have to use some needle nose pliers to give you the leverage. So pull those 2 out for the heater relay, and then the other ones come out pretty easy. With the new controller, you may get another 7-8 years of service without any trouble. This is just a common kind of weakness to this particular dryer, is this controller. I just got a remanufactured one, so I think it was only $130. So I'm going to take out these screws that are holding the controller to the plastic front panel. And once I get those off, I can just separate the 2. I can pull the controller off of the plastic panel. Just got to get a grip on it, kind of wiggle it, lift it, and it'll come free. What you'll notice on the old control is that there's some plastic little, we might call them light lenses, that have to be removed from the old control and put onto the new controller. Here's the two together. They're different colors, but that's okay. It doesn't make any difference. Just going to make sure we remove all these screws. We loosen them, but we got to make sure we remove them and get them out of the way. We're going to reuse them. I'm pulling the plastic lenses off of the old one and putting it on the new one. I think there's 4 assemblies like this that you have to transfer over. Really easy though, they just push them into position. I'm not sure if the dryer overheating due to the clogged lint tube was a contributor to this controller dying early, or if that was just going to happen anyway, but it's really good to keep those vent tubes cleared out, especially if your vent tube leaves your house in a vertical manner instead of on the horizontal plane. If it just goes straight up through your roof, it's much more likely to clog probably about every 6 months, so it's good to clean it. So I'm just transferring over those little plastic lens assemblies, and I got them all. I just got to reposition this last one. And then there's a knob that's stuck on the old controller that you have to pull out and put into the new controller. There's two knobs on the front of the control panel, and these little stems have to be transferred over. So I'm just going to push it into the new controller, and then I'm going to feed the new controller into the plastic front control panel, and just got to make sure everything lines up. Take your time here. This is a little tricky because you got to get these black stems that go into the front controls to line up. It may take a while, so don't get frustrated. Just keep working with it. Turn the knobs until it all lines up. It'll click into place. There we go. Then we're going to put in the screws that hold it together, hold it to the control. And after that, you'll have a dryer that works and doesn't beep continuously and just randomly for no reason. Just tighten all those up. I noticed after I put everything together and I tested the unit, it did really good, no more beeping, but only after about 5 minutes of testing, I noticed I put my hand on the top panel and almost got burned because the top panel was so hot. That's an indication that the dryer is not able to get rid of its heat through the vent tube, and that made me aware that I had to really clean that vent tube. So if you run a dryer, it should get warm, but if it's so hot to the touch that it almost burns you, that's an indication that there's a malfunction, usually due to the dryer vent tube being clogged, either in the tube or as it leaves the house. So we're putting these modular connectors back into the new controller. You can just look at the picture you took on your phone as a reference. But it's pretty simple on this machine, not too many connections. We're going to feed those wires back through the firewall, back through the frame. We're going to reconnect the modular connectors. Just have to line this one back up. There we go. Got it plugged back in. I'm going to give it a little test. Make sure it's working. Get the panel back into position, and I'll just put those 4 screws in that hold it, 2 at the top and then 2 in the bottom right and bottom left hand corner. So we're just putting in a few more screws here to hold on the front panel, and we can give it a test. It's good to put those in by hand a little bit first, just to get them started, and then use your screw gun to drive it in all the way. There we go. Give it a test. So it's running good. It's not beeping. And I'm going to open up the old board, the old controller, just to look at the circuit board. Sometimes you'll see a component that has overheated. You'll see a burn mark on the circuit board, just so you know which component had trouble. When I took a look at this one, though, I couldn't really see anything. It could be a diode. There's so many different components that could go south. You'd have to test each one, but the circuit board looked pretty good. Didn't see any obvious burn marks. But I did notice after I tested it, when I was working with it, that the top panel did get pretty hot. So I knew that vent tube was clogged. I think that there was maybe even a bird that had flown in and set up a nest on the outside of the vent tube, and that's what started the clog. So I'm putting the top panel back in, get it in position, and I'm going to push it toward me, and then I'll put in the 2 Phillips head screws to hold it. And that's it. You'll have a dryer that's going to work really well for a long time, and for not a whole lot of money to buy a new controller, especially if it's a reconditioned one. I did notice that the filter was not sitting all the way down as it should. So I pulled it out, and I got a pretty long screwdriver. You could use like an old coat hanger that's straightened out. And I used that to knock the lint or dust off of a little shelf that the filter rests on. That was preventing the filter from sitting down flat. It's not good because then lint can travel into your machine easier. So I just knocked off that lint off of the shelf, and then I put the filter back in, and it seated in correctly. There we go. So thanks so much for watching, and please subscribe when you get a chance.